Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Can I get a warm, loud, proud Panama City appreciation for Representative, my dear sister, Angie Nixon, and our beloved brother, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, please. Dr. Hill took 2 flights the whole day to get here. Literally checked in, and then I said, hey, your Uber is outside. He said, I'm here, let's go, I'm at the lobby. Sister Angie, this morning, her connecting flight, she could not make it. She called me and said, hey, look, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I said, look, you take care of yourself. She has something very important. Tomorrow morning, she has to be back in Jacksonville. I said, it's up to you, I'll leave it up to you, but take care of yourself. A few minutes later, she said, I'm coming. She drove from Jacksonville, walked in, in the rain, drenched, and came right to the stage. You guys saw this, she was out of breath, right to the stage. So, by the grace of Allah, the good news is this. I'm the last speaker. The other so good news is that I'm also responsible for fundraising as well. We don't have a professional fundraiser today, so I'm going to have to squeeze you, inshallah. As they say, there is enough funds. We have the funds. We have it. It's just not convincing you to give it. May Allah open our hearts. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. That's not going to charge you. May Allah open our hearts. Ameen. All right. As I'm listening to Omar Saleh talk about legal and Mary talk about policy and Sister Angie and Dr. Hill talk, I'm thinking about, what is the best approach to kind of give you what the legal fight looks like. I want you to understand this, that there will always be a legal fight if you're not changing policy. That's why you heard Brother Omar say something in the very beginning. He said, we've been fighting the same fights. The clients change, but the issues remain the same. How do you go past that? How do you go past the fact, the CAIR family, because we saw it, that we had 3 other incidents where the perpetrator is not black, but the police report says black. Where you have an issue where when the victims are Muslims, the state statute that is implemented and legislated by Governor DeSantis is not implemented because there is no precedence of law. But right now, a Muslim brother who, a Palestinian Christian in Jacksonville sees an Israeli flag, so he talks to his HOA and say, hey, this is not per HOA regulations. The HOA doesn't do anything. So he says, well, you know what? Then I'm going to put up the Palestinian flag. Guess what? Now he is being charged by that same statute, while the other person is not. Why is that? Because as you are here tonight, there is another room, maybe with more money, but not more conviction. Maybe with more people, but not more strength. Maybe the only thing that they have done a little bit better is they have connected the dots. They have built coalition on falsehood. They have built relationships on hate. That's why when you have hundreds of legislatures in Tallahassee, only one black woman stands up and nobody says anything to support her. Because it's normalized. It's okay. So if I ask you whether it's CAIR family, or I'll give you something else because we all have children, we want to protect our children. Something that's shocking. There are cases that we're like, okay, that's the typical stuff we see. And then there are cases where I'm shaken to my core. I'll give you an example. You have a Muslim kid, all of us have kids. He's on Xbox playing a game. Now, they can play with anybody from anywhere. They can play with somebody from Italy, from Kenya, from anywhere else. So one of them in this chat room in this game makes a comment, Xbox, or say PlayStation, if you will. Next thing you know, within a day or two, the FBI shows up. Tell me, what was he playing? A game, a chat room. Do you understand the level of surveillance? Do you understand the level of surveillance on Muslim children, on colored children? And then other children who were playing and were maybe traveling, when they were coming in, their families are being stopped at the airport. Look how orchestrated this is. But when we have multiple cases, one in South Florida, one in Sarasota, one in Jacksonville, and we're like, it's blatant. This is racism, right? This is hatred. We don't have any precedents for this. We don't know how to implement. It's too new. But when we see that the victims they look different, maybe not of color, maybe not Muslim, then there's no question. So my question to you is, why is that happening? It's happening, because we're not building coalition consistently. We're not building power consistently. We have a habit of shining the light and then turning it off because we get tired. So for the past 3 years, this has been a continuous conversation that how do we move this forward? And then we're faced with a genocide where we have to expedite that conversation. By expediting that conversation, we realize that we need a ground game that can keep the light on. That can keep the light on. Whether we're going into the legislative session or a special session starting on the 27th in Tallahassee, or the session starting later in March for another 60 days, our sister Angie Nixon needs help, support. Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith needs help and support. Where does that light come from? But imagine the others that we could not get to. And we will never be able to get to if we don't influence policy. Policy is your fight in Tallahassee. So how are we going to keep the light on? Mary told you how we're going to do it. Does anybody remember? How are we going to keep the light on? Advocacy hubs. These are local hubs. There's 28 congressional districts. 28 congressional districts in Florida. That's our first goal. We want to create groups of local people, Muslim, coalition partners, non-Muslims, that are concerned about one thing: justice. They're concerned about what? Justice. Right? Justice. If the entire Quran could be summarized, it would be establishing justice. Malik Yawmiddin, the very surah that we recite 17 times a day, it's Malik Yawmiddin, a day of justice. A day that every single person will get or receive what they have earned. So right now, the legislative session is coming up. The special session, the sessions are coming up. The Muslims in Florida have not had a tangible representation. Last year was our first year where we made a tangible effort. If you remember, I made 3 promises last year and the masjid. We said we need to hire a policy department. By the grace of Allah, we did. We need to engage in Tallahassee. By the grace of Allah, we did. And it was because of partners, people of love and care and justice, like Representative Angie Nixon and Carlos Guillermo Smith and others, that we were in Tallahassee. And the third, we said we have to push back against dangerous legislation. And there's a bunch of them. If you look at the annual impact highlight, look at the bottom, and it'll tell you the policy highlights. Look at the amendments that we were able to do. 3 promises by the grace of Allah we made, and by the grace of Allah, because of your support, we were able to keep. But now, what's the next step? Is to keep the light on, so that we don't have a state attorney telling us, well, I don't have any reference to implement this statute. And we don't see that in other places. So in order for us to do this, we have to be in Tallahassee. Now I'll tell you one important thing about why are we talking about this in Panama City. And mashallah, I know there's folks from Tallahassee. The good thing about Tallahassee, I say, is that Allah is already in it. You can't spell Tallahassee without Allah. So we just have to give Muhammad Rasulullah. But that's Shahadatain, Dr. Hill. That's the only thing left. They got the first part, we just got to go to the second part. But subhanAllah, when we look strategically, there's a few things that stand out. Panama City has historically stood by CAIR Florida. Our dear sister Hiba has been here, and another daughter of your community, Azka. Does anybody know where Azka is today? I remember hiring Azka part-time in CAIR, Georgia, and I remember the plethora of questions that she had for me, and now she is the executive director of CAIR, Georgia. So you've played a historic part. And mashallah, you guys, Panama City, you're everywhere. You're Tampa, you have family in Tampa, you have family in South Florida. Everywhere we go, we hear Panama City. Even in other parts of the nation, especially for the elders, without naming any names in this room, you have supported Muslim organizations from the inception to where they are today. Takbir. So when we thought about establishing a center, it only made sense to establish in Panama City. Now there are people, if you remember when I first joined CAIR Florida about 3.5 years ago, some of you were in a conversation, somebody asked me, are you going to open an office in Panama City? And I said no, because we don't have the strategic plan in place for us to just an open office. And I remember there was 2 or 3 individuals who were upset. They said, no, you have to. I said, look, I'm not going to make a false promise. I'm not going to say something to you just so you could support. That's not ethical, and that's not the way an organization, a Muslim organization, function. And I'll be very honest, because of that answer, we lost donors. We lost donors who said, we're not going to. I said, look, don't donate just because you want an office. We are a community. If we have a strong team, we can do better. So withdrawing support doesn't help. And our deen teaches us that the Muslim does not leave his brother or sister behind, especially when we are in the time of need. And as Dr. Hill has mentioned, Representative Nixon has mentioned, this is the time. When have we ever seen and equated that, you know what, both parties are the same? When you see what the policy team is doing in Tallahassee, you will see that we're on both sides, lobbying both sides. That's how you get an amendment done that sticks in the lower house and in the upper house. But brothers and sisters, we can't do this alone. We need support to have staff in the panhandle constantly. So this is our strategy. Not only are we moving with the advocacy hubs, and there is substantial numbers, mashallah, within the panhandle, but our goal is to open an office and have that team, maybe an individual, and inshallah, if Allah gives tawfiq to have more, to engage the Panama City community, Pensacola, and Tallahassee. So the west side of the panhandle. They will be the CAIR Florida representative, working with the advocacy hubs, the masajid, the schools, the organization. And in my view, in my humble opinion, focusing on youth and implementing within them, impressing upon their hearts that yes, it's good to give somebody a translation Quran. Yes, it's good to talk to somebody about Islam, but it's just as good, if not better, to have a mind of public service. that they should aspire to be Muslim state representatives. They should aspire to be standing next to Angie Nixon, standing next to Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, standing next to Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. I'm not saying by any measure anybody is perfect. Wal kamalu lillah. What we are saying is we are in a dar al-asbab, in a abode of means. We use the framework our deen has given, and we build by the grace of Allah. That's what we're here to do tonight.